Docket 388. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This hearing is called to order this Tuesday, January 12th, 2010 at 3:05. And I'm Dan Cruz, Chairman of the Connecticut Siting Council. And other members of the council here with us this afternoon are Colin C. Tate, Vice Chairman, Brian Golubowski, the designee for Commissioner Amy Morello of the Department of Environmental Protection, Wayne B. Esky, designee for Commissioner Kevin M. Delgado of the Department of Public Utility Control, Philip G. Ashton, Daniel P. Lynch Jr., James J. Murphy Jr., Dr. Barbara Bell, and Edward S. Walensky. We have members of our staff with us here this afternoon who include S. Derek Phelps, our Executive Director, Melanie Bachman, our Staff Attorney, Michael Perone, our Siting Analyst, Custodian of the Record, Lisa Fontaine, together with our court reporter, Gabriel Reyes, and our audio technician, Garrett Mitchell. And this hearing is held pursuant to the provisions of Title 16 of the Connecticut General Statutes and of the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act upon an application from New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, also known as AT&T, for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Need for the construction, maintenance, and operation of a telecommunications facility located at 1990 Litchfield Turnpike here in Woodbridge. This application was received by the Council on September 23rd, 2009. Now, I wish to note that, as a reminder to all ex parte, that is off-record communication with a member of the Council, a member of the Council staff upon the merits of this application is prohibited by law. I also wish to draw your attention that the Federal Communications Commission has directed that all state and local governments render decisions on new tower proposals within 150 days of the receipt of an application, or the applicant may have this matter heard and decided by a Superior Court judge and according to their rules and procedures. Now, in 1996, the Congress recognized the nationwide need for high-quality cellular telephone service. And through the passage of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, Congress enacted legislation designed to promote competition, to encourage technical innovations, and to foster lower prices. Consequently, Congress has preempted the determination of a public need for cellular service, although not the need as to any particular site. And there are several other specific ways in which this Act restricts our actions. First, this Act prohibits any state or local government or agency thereof, such as this Council, from regulating towers on the basis of environmental effects or health effects of radio frequency emissions, to the extent that those emissions are within their rules and their equipment are compliant with the FCC's regulations. Also, this Act blocks state and local governments and agencies such as this Council from prohibiting personal wireless service for any local area or from discriminating between and amongst providers. Simply put, even if one company provides coverage for an area, other companies have a right to compete and to offer their services therein. Now, the Council needs to weigh whether the applicant has met its burden of proof that there is a coverage problem, and that coverage problem cannot be solved by tower sharing or by utilizing some other existing facility. Additionally, the Council needs to examine the applicant's proposal, including its form and its height, to determine if the proposal will solve the coverage problem. Moreover, we must examine whether better alternatives exist, including better available alternative sites. Now, the parties that intervened to the proceedings here this afternoon are as follows. We have the applicant, which is New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, and they're here through their attorney, Christopher B. Fisher, of the law firm of Cuddy & Feder LLP. We're going to be proceeding in accordance with the prepared agenda, copies of which are available here this afternoon and this evening. And at the end of this afternoon session, we will recess and reconvene at 7. And that 7 o'clock hearing will be reserved first for the public to make brief oral statements into the record. I wish to note for those who are here and cannot be there at the 7 o'clock hearing, or those who think of something afterwards, having testified, that anyone may send written comments to the council within 30 days of the date of this hearing. And those written comments will be given the same weight as if spoken here this evening. And if necessary, and time permits, party and intervener presentations which began this afternoon will continue thereafter, should time remain. And as always, a verbatim transcript will be prepared, and a copy of which will be deposited with the Woodbridge Town Clerk for the convenience of the public. At the end of each session of this hearing, I will announce a date and time and place for the next session, should one be necessary, and a date by which any and all parties and interveners, including the applicant, may submit briefs and proposed findings of facts. This time, I know that we have the first selectman with us, who would like to make a brief statement. Mr. First Selectman Sheehy, thank you for accommodating us in your community. We do appreciate it.
Welcome to Woodbridge. We're happy to have you here tonight, and this is my first experience where we had a musical interlude before the proceedings began, so that's a very nice touch that the Citing Council brought to Woodbridge.
Well, we'll take selections later on.
All right. I previously had submitted a letter dated October 15, 2009 to Mr. Phelps as the Executive Director of the Connecticut Citing Council. And in that letter, I referred to an October 14, 2009 presentation by attorneys Kevin Day and attorney Daniel Wow on behalf of AT&T as to a proposed wireless telecommunication tower facility to be located at 1990 Litchfield Turnpike in Woodbridge. Following that presentation, several residents of Woodbridge spoke either in opposition or with reservation about the application. A summary of their testimony is attached to that letter. I also enclosed in that letter copies of written correspondence received by the Board of Selectmen prior to AT&T's presentation. Following the public comments, the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to inform the Citing Council that it should explore alternative locations for a proposed tower other than the proposed site, such as look at moving away from the chosen location. If the tower must be near the chosen location, consider installing antenna or other structures in the area, such as at the Regional Water Authority filtration plant, transmission line towers, existing structures on the Shepherd property, namely silos, or design the tower to look more like a tree. And the summary of, I have attached to that letter, summary of the testimony at that hearing that we held. Maria Kane, chairman of the Conservation Commission in Woodbridge, testified. She suggested that the tower be located in the commercial district. Constant Eklund of 27 Cedar Road noted that the area of Litchfield Turnpike where the tower is to be located is a pristine historic valley, and that should not be destroyed to benefit 1.5-mile radius of service. Joseph P. Solido at 11 Clark Road recommended the southeast corner of Woodbridge as a location. Richard Forsilius of 1105 Racebrook Road and the past president of the Woodbridge Park Association suggested the following options. Look at moving away from the chosen location. If the tower must be near the chosen location, consider installing antenna on other structures in the area, such as the Regional Water Authority filtration plant, transmission line towers, existing structures on the Shepherd property, such as the silo, or design the tower to look more like a tree. We received 4 letters, one from Carol Rosen of 14 Clark Road, who stated that there would be a negative impact on bird migrations. The West Rock Ridge, which is the other side of the valley, is an important bird breeding area. Co-located on existing high voltage power line towers. Terry Evelyn and Stuart Green of 1944 Litchfield Turnpike pointed out the negative impact on environment, animal, human, and plant life. Nancy Polk, who I'm sure will be speaking here, suggested that the tower be located in the industrial and commercial zones. And Frank Castillo of 3 Blue Trail Drive stated that the tower would be very near his home. He would prefer it elsewhere, but if it can be disguised as a tree, he would have no objection to a tower virtually in my backyard. Since that communication with the siting council, we have received further communications, one from Nancy Polk, who I know is going to speak here, but basically she says in an email addressed to the Board of Selectmen on January 7th that there has been located an alternative site on the roof of the old Lender building at 1764 and 1768 Litchfield Turnpike. This is the roof where the Woodbridge Police had a monopole. There are currently 2 monopoles on the roof, and she talked to the listing agent for Cushman & Wakefield, who was enthusiastic about having another monopole tenant on the roof. She also noted that the siting council should consider co-locating on the new 345 kilovolt transmission towers. And finally, we've received one further correspondence, and that's from Catherine Bishop Gartman of 3 Bishop Drive, a letter which we received on January 11th. And let me just summarize this letter, that she suggests that the area be preserved and that the tower be located somewhere else. So that's the information we submit on behalf of the Board of Selectmen to the Siting Council in connection with your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. First Selectman, and we do appreciate these comments as always, and that's why we travel to each community to listen to the people. And speaking of which, I ask at this time the unanimous consent of the council to take up, out of order, testimony of Nancy Polk, who, due to unusual circumstances, will not be able to testify at our 7 o'clock hearing.
Second.
No objection? No objection. Ms. Polk, would you tell us, make sure you spell your last name for us, and tell us where you live, please.
It's Nancy Polk at 1932 Litchfield Turnpike. My name is spelled P-O-L-K.
And if I'm coming from the Parkway, you would be closer to the Parkway or beyond this location?
I'm exactly 2 miles from exit 59, American Parkway.
Before I get to the proposed location or
Yes.
after? Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming out on a cold day. I want to begin my remarks by telling you that we are all neighbors. Sarah Shepherd and her family are valued members of the community and the neighborhood. For me and many of those who will speak and write to you, this is not a question of not my backyard. I live far enough away that it would have no impact on the values of my property. I am not sure of the stated need, despite all the engineering reports. I use Verizon and have no problem. A friend parked in front of the Shepherd farm and using his AT&T phone, he had a problem-free conversation. I understand the need for competition, but I know anecdotally that other brands of cell phones work just fine in this area. So why do we object so strenuously to the placement of the monopole at 1990 Litchfield? This is a very old road. It was the link between New Haven and Waterbury for horses and carriages. We have always felt it was good fortune that prevented the development of the turnpike. The monopole would face 5,000 acres of watershed and reservoirs. The tower would diminish the rural, historic character of this area. It would add an industrial element for 30 years, or until technology eclipses the need for cell towers. The president of the Amity Historical Society, Don Menzies, knows this corridor well and will present a detailed explanation of his opposition. A new finding that the State Preservation Society does not know about is across from the proposed site. A large boulder has historic carvings from the 1800s. The state archaeologist has noted its significance, and we're going to ask him to submit a letter to you.
I'm sorry, you said a folder?
A boulder,
Boulder?
a big rock.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
But behind that boulder is a flat, grassy area where the old North School stood. It was a one-room schoolhouse. And both sites are promising big sites. The DEP has identified a cell with an animal of concern right across the street. It's the ribbon snake. Since I have seen them in my garden, which is on the same side as the proposed tower, it seems reasonable to assume they would find their way up the hill where the proposed site will be. This area is stunning in fall when the leaves turn their brilliant colors, so we're sorry that the hearing could not occur then. The lakes that serve as reservoirs for wildlife add to the rural character. The West Rock Ridge State Park is also across the street in the vicinity of the proposed site. The Parks Association will speak to this. The Conservation Commission was the driving force behind the purchase of some of the original Shepherd farmland. The chairman of the Conservation Commission will speak tonight. I have spoken to AT&T, UI, the Regional Water Authority, and ISO New England. I've come away from these conversations frustrated as it became clear that they don't work together to the benefit of their consumers. I suspect this is no surprise to people sitting here. Each one jealously guards their own turf. Right behind the tower is the new 345 kilovolt transmission towers. We understand the complexity of locating the monopole on the transmission towers and the issue of shutdown. However, AT&T will not explore the feasibility of co-locating on the tower, possibly using new technology. Transmission towers are present on the water company land across the street from the proposed site, but the Regional Water Authority maintains that they never permit building on their Class 1 and 2 lands. Even though the towers may be the result of historic agreements, it should be possible to re-examine the potential for mounting monopoles on transmission towers on watershed land. Our first alternative proposal is co-location using the transmission towers. Also, our second alternative proposal is for 1764 or 1768 Litchfield Turnpike. There are currently 2 monopoles on the roof of that commercial building, and there's room for a third. It is so well camouflaged that they are not even noticeable, unlike the proposed tower, which will dominate and overwhelm the area. The objection to the monopole is cumulative. It will despoil the rural landscape, inject an industrial note to an historic corridor, and disturb the wildlife. It will add to the heavy footprint of the utilities rather than seek to co-locate on an existing structure. The building at 1764-68 offers a viable alternative. Thank you very much for this time. I have to be in New Haven from 5 to 9.
Thank you, Ms. Polk, and thank you for sharing those ideas with us and the commission. This time, I wish to call everyone's attention to those items shown in the hearing program. Those items shown as 1D, 1 through 19, as items that the council intends to take, which the council intends to take administrative notice. Is there any objection to the council taking administrative notice of these items so that the public may know what those things that we consider?
No objection.
If I need a paper, I will.
Sure, there are copies of the agenda over there. Please help yourself. And with that, council will take administrative notice of these items. Is there any objection to taking in the correspondence from the town in the letter dated October 15th, so ably summarized by First Selectman Shee, or the letter from State Representative Themis Clarice? Hearing none, we will take those in. At this time, then, turning to those items shown. It's 2B, 1 through 5. Is there any objection to marking these for identification purposes only? And hearing none, we will mark these for identification purposes only. Attorney Fisher.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of council.
Good afternoon.
Christopher Fisher, on behalf of AT&T. Chairman, on item number 2A in the program under administrative notice, we have not intended to offer anything for administrative notice, but I do have 3 documents or dockets that I'd like to reference for the council. I'll try to get the actual citations and copies of any materials that my colleagues in transit at this point.
Sure, these are deal with matters which we previously decided as members of the council.
The first docket is a general reference to the Town of Madison Light Tower docket. The reason I seek administrative notice on that particular docket are relative to findings on historic impact. There was a tower facility proposed adjacent to the EP site that was listed on the National Register. The second item we'd like to take administrative notice of are the dockets, and I'll get the references, which are the state-owned tower and the Massachusetts-owned tower that are actually in West Rock State Park or within the park boundaries itself on the ridge to the south of the proposed site. And the third item is not a council docket, it's a federal document. It's an FCC National Programmatic Agreement, which is a agreement that relates to state historic preservation officers' obligations nationwide, but it relates to Connecticut as well with respect to the historic review and National Environmental Policy Act.
Is there any objections from the members of the council to taking administrative notice of these items? Hearing none, we will take administrative notice of those documents outlined.
Thank you, Chairman.
Attorney Fisher.
I do also have 2 additional items that I would like to add to the exhibits for identification. First, we could identify as number 6. It's a January 12, 2010 memorandum that I just received from our consultant at Ottery Group. It was prepared by Stacy Patterson, who's an architectural historian, and she has it around already. It relates to some of the comments that were made in the limited appearance correspondence she just received yesterday and we received today from that were listed in the hearing program just previously. And I've provided sufficient copies to Mr. Perone so that he has those available. And then the item I'd like to have is number 7 is a updated view shed map that's been prepared by Mr. Baskin's office at Clough Harbor. It specifically points out on the map the New England Cement Kiln and Quarry site that was part of that correspondence that have been referenced, as I mentioned. And those have been provided enough copies as well. Mr. Perone.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Is there any objections marking these 2 items, the memo and the revised view shed, for identification purposes only as 6 and 7? Hearing none, they will be so marked for identification purposes only.
Thank you, Chairman. With those additions, we have 7 exhibits listed for identification in the hearing program. If I could ask each of the witnesses to individually identify, did you prepare, assist in the preparation?
Mr. Fisher, would you mind introducing them first?
Thank you,
Then
Chairman.
we'll swear them in and then you can change.
To my far right is Mr. Anthony Wells, who's a radio frequency engineer who's previously testified before the council. He's with C-Squared Systems. He's here on AT&T's behalf today. To my immediate right is Mr. John Blevins, To my left is Mr. Kevin Day, who's with SAI, which is the real estate company employed by AT&T on this project. And to my far left is Mr. Rodney Baskin, also, with CHA, who's responsible for site planning, engineering, and visual analysis.
Great, then if members of this panel might rise. Attorney Bogdan, would you be so kind as to swear them in as witnesses?
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or sincerely affirm as the case may be that the evidence you shall give concerning this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, without penalty of perjury? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Attorney Bogdan. Attorney Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd ask each of the witnesses, instead of going through each of the documents, did you assist in preparation, prepare, and otherwise procure the information that's been identified in the program under Roman numeral 2A 1 through 7?
Anthony Wells, yes. John Mullins, yes. Doug Davis.
Ron Baskin, yes. And with respect to the documents that have been provided, are there corrections or modifications that you can identify with respect to those documents you've been responsible for?
Anthony Wells, no. John Mullins. Joe Davis.
Go ahead.
Ronnie Baskin, I do have a couple of clarifications I'd like to mention to the council. Behind tab 3 of the application, there's a narrative, which is the first page behind the application, and subsequent to the technical consultation, it was suggested and we agreed to revise the compound from 75 foot by 75 foot, which is shown in that narrative, to 40 foot by 90 foot to reduce the amount of carbon fill. The 40 foot by 90 foot compound is reflected in the maps, but not in the narrative. So I just wanted to clarify that. Behind tab 4, the view shed analysis, Attorney Fisher mentioned that we revised that today based on information we got yesterday to add the New England Cement Company kiln location, and we also added a cemetery, Sperry Cemetery, which is north on Route 69, and it's shown on your on the revised view shed map. And the final is the, and this is also behind tab 3. I apologize for going back, but the tree inventory there at the back of the application, tab 3, based on that letter dated March 2nd. I mentioned this in the field, but I wanted to get on the record that we showed 9 trees to be removed, 6 inches in diameter at breast height or greater. Based on our walk today, it was visible that several trees had recently been removed, so that count should be revised, not a revised count yet. But some of those trees that were identified to be removed have been removed. And they've been removed. The landlord burns wood in her house and also sells small
On this new view shed map, is there an index for the numbering?
Yes, there is. If you look for the kiln, it's in historic sites on the very left side at the bottom. And it's page 05. And it is shown near the north side of Lake Dawson. Okay. And in the cemetery, under the churches and cemeteries, numbers, this is to the far right of those different items. It's C04, the Sperry Cemetery. And if you look north on 69, north of the site, near the edge of the radius, to the left side of the roadway, that's where the Sperry Cemetery is. Thank you.
Mr. Baskin? Mr. Baskin, regarding the tree inventory correction that you just made, if I look in the application, behind tab 3, as you said, there's a little chart towards the back of the tab 3 material. You said that showed 9 trees to be removed, and you corrected that, but it shows 17, doesn't it?
It does show 17, and I apologize for that. That information shows 17. We did reduce that to 9, and now it needs to be reduced again because of the recent removal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay, did you have any corrections or modifications to the documents? No, I did not. With those changes, our documents are provided true and accurate to the best of your belief.
Anthony Wells, yes. John Wilkins, yes. Joe Day, yes.
Rodney Nelson, yes.
Chairman, I would ask that you accept those amendments at this time.
Is there any objection to the admission of these items previously marked for identification as full exhibits in these proceedings? And hearing none, they will be so admitted.
Chairman, I also have two witnesses that are here today that I'd like to add to the witness list so that they're available for council questions to the extent they come up. The first is Mr. Tim Burks. He's with the firm of SAI. Mr. Burks has a number of responsibilities with respect to AT&T, but he primarily is the one who has direct communication with CLMP on all of our siting issues with respect to CLMP over a very number of years. He's available to provide further information to the council in that regard. And then also, to the extent the council would like to hear evidence, we don't intend to present any. Ms. Sarah Shepard, who's the property owner, is here available also to provide some more testimony to the extent the council sees it.
And then, why don't we have them both sworn in at this time so we don't forget it later on when should we need new testimony. So we have Mr. Burks and Ms. Shepard. Attorney Bob.
Do you solemnly swear or sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you shall give concerning this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both having been so sworn. Why don't we begin with questions by Mr. Perron. Mr. Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the first selectman's letter dated October 15, 2009, could AT&T respond to the points listed in that letter, the suggested alternatives?
If we could take them one at a time, that'd probably be helpful. The first, I guess, was the, I believe, the high-tension power line issue.
Yes.
Tim.
Mr. Burks, pull up a chair. That's usually the best thing. The closer you can sit next to you, the more you're able to. So the first question then is concerning, you read the first selectman's concerns, especially with regard to the co-location on certain utility poles.
Yes, and when we first started to consider this location, I did make application to CLG, and that was back in, I think, April of 2008. And that's a customary process. They responded back with a rating for the line, and they gave us, this line unfortunately had the worst rating in terms of the ability to get an outage.
Perhaps it might be easier if we follow along. There is, I believe, a letter in the application from CLMP. On tab 2. No, but it might be, I just want to call everyone's attention to that, and it might be helpful to reference that. So that's the letter from Lori Aylesworth, Vice President of Transmission and Engineering and Maintenance for CLMP, dated May 21st. Is that the response from them?
Well, there was an initial email response.
It was wonderful.
And then later on, I asked them if they could put it in writing on their letterhead, and they did so. And that's why you see it May 21st of 2009.
Okay, and the reason that they gave as these lines are not available, for what reason?
It has their highest outage rating, which is a 4, which means it's critical for the reliability of the New England power system. And it also, the possibility of obtaining an outage would be extremely difficult, if it might not even ever be obtained. And that's what the commission put in the letter.
Sure, and that means that in order to put something on and to repair it or maintain it, they would, the company, AT&T would be required to ask them to turn off the power line?
Correct, and it could take an inordinate amount of time to get that achieved. And in fact, we have current upgrades on other end-use facilities for our latest technology, and it's taken me, in some instances, the better part of 2 years to be able to upgrade those sites with cancellations of outages or even getting the initial outages scheduled at all. So it's, pardon me? Right, yeah, these are other lines across in various areas of the state. So it can be very problematic, and they're right, those are not rated for, those are lower outage rating lines. So it can be very problematic not only to build a brand new site here, a new co-location, but also to upgrade them later as technology changes.
And the consequences to those towers, if you can't maintain them, or if you have to wait until either an outage, scheduled or otherwise, the consequences to the service in the area?
Well, just a tremendous delay in providing that service, that coverage to the area, or the latest technology.
Yeah, and I might add the maintenance, obviously, maintenance issues, as the chairman pointed out, with the weather in New England is harsh, and you have to have a mechanical connection between your base station and the antennas, and that sometimes fails. There's water in it, ice, etc. Inability to access that for 2 years, I mean, the site would be down for years. Right, they would not have this in there.
We also have power mounted amplifiers at the top of the tower, so they are active. They also fail.
Chairman, if I might, just, I did ask Mr. Burks as well, beyond what happened in 2008 and then the correspondence we received earlier this year, to try to follow up with CLMP for more information from CLMP, if that was possible. And he's available to just the latest efforts and information he's provided.
Sure, why don't you update us, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Esty to go ahead and ask some follow-ups.
Yeah, I have tried to correspond with them regarding more detailed information, and they are limited, they say they're limited in the amount of information that can be provided from a security, homeland security kind of perspective. Obviously, they don't really want to identify, lines that are really critical to the network and make that public. So it's been difficult to get follow-up information.
Is it part of the critical infrastructure?
Correct.
Mr. Esty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell me the difference between a category rating 4 and 5 and 3?
Well, 4 is the highest, but as far as the specifics of that, end use reluctant, I don't know, and end use reluctant to provide the details on that, and what the differences are, and why they rate a line as high as they do.
4 is worse than a 3.
Yes.
5 is worse than a 4. That's as much as you know about that.
I have not seen a 5, I've seen a 4 is the highest I've seen in their rating category.
The best we've been able to surmise is that the ratings they provide on lines with range from 1 to 4. 4 is highly unlikely, if ever, to be able to be modified because it's given the highest rating as far as their own internal energy planning or security or whatever criteria they use. We just don't know what those criteria are, and we ask for them, but they won't provide those to us.
This is the transmission line,
Yes, that is the.
and it's owned by CLMP and not by ISO.
I believe it's owned by CLMP.
And you know the relationship between the outage and ISO's needs and CLMP's responsibility as ISO?
Well, I know that they run these outages through what's called convex and ISO. I don't know all the details of that, but I have to comment on that.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Esty. Just to refresh everyone, ISO is the system operator. CLMP actually owns the lines, but they have contracts by and through ISO to deliver reliable energy. And part one of the big standards is reliability, which translates to they don't want any fault in the system may result in large segments of the population being left without power. And as we've seen in, what was it, 2006, 2003, cascading effect throughout the country, and that's one of those things they try to avoid. Mr. Ashton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The transmission lines in that area consist of a single 345 kV circuit, and I believe a double 115 kV circuit, which is not quite as tall, but pretty tall. They're probably in the range of 80 feet or something like that. Did you investigate the possibility of going on the 115 kV?
Actually, that's Kevin on that.
Yeah, there's two lines up there. I don't have the numbers, but we did ask them about both. There's two, so they just ran a new line through there. And I have no idea what electric is on which ones, but we just basically initially said, can we run the power poles in the area? And then you can't just talk to anybody there, so that's when I made out the application and Tim Burks followed up on it. But initial request was, we'll go on anything you've got if you can, and it'll work. And it kind of went from there. They're very tough to get information out of.
The letter that Lori Ellsworth sent back is explicit as to which structure on which line, and that's the 3827 line is a 345 kV line. The 115 is not mentioned at all.
For the council's benefit, I asked Mr. Burks to get correspondence, if we could get it from CMP. We could try to go back, because Mr. Burks' original 2008 inquiries here were by email correspondence back and forth. We could try at the break to try to see if we could find out that information. I think Mr. Day was generally looking at anything there.
I'm looking at a door half closed at this stage.
When this search started, there was only one line there.
No, that's not true. There were three structures there a few years ago, and it's been reduced to two structures abreast.
Okay, well, maybe the easiest thing to do is see if we can get that email and see if we can get an answer. And if we can't get it down, we want it as a late file. Is that okay with you, Mr. Ashton?
That's fine.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Burks, does AT&T currently have any antennas on 345 kV lines?
One moment, please. Thank you.
I'm only aware of one line where we did build there, and that was in Hamden on Route 10. And we did that as part of before they actually changed the lines. So we were able to work with them to design that line to be monopole / transmission line pole.
And how do you handle the maintenance on that power mount now?
Well, again, that would require an outage if we had to. Of course, that happened late enough that what we did with our latest technology there. So, but in the future, if technology changes again, that would require an outage to change those antennas or upgrade them. So that could be difficult.
When you say latest technology, exactly what are you referring to? The antennas are...
Well, the 3G and then the 4G that's coming up uses either different frequencies or different technology for broadband communications. I'm sure the engineers here could shed more light on that.
Well, I understand roughly what you're referring to, but what I don't understand is why would this new technology operating at different frequencies with different radios require less maintenance than earlier technology?
It's not really the maintenance. It requires us to replace the existing antenna, which, if we don't get it turned down, essentially the site is going to become an abandoned site. We'll remove the electronics and have to leave the antennas up there, just idle forever.
So your problem is replacing antennas in order to upgrade the technology, not routine maintenance to deal with connection problems, which I assume would happen with either type of antenna.
That's true, it would happen either way, but yes, it could be a maintenance problem as well as a replacement problem. The replacement, of course, would be new technology, but the maintenance could just happen if we lost a preamp or coax connector went bad down. And if we can't get it turned down, you can't climb through 300K. So it would just eventually become an isolated, abandoned site.
So I'm just trying to discriminate. Maintenance problems with bad coax connections or whatever, those can happen no matter what.
Anytime, any technology.
Okay, thank you.
And why don't, as a follow-up to Dr. Bellis, what makes doing it in Hamden feasible and doing it here?
Because we did
less
it before it was built.
Because you designed it as part of the construction of that specific power tower?
Ours was built before those lines we brought in onto that tower. So,
Chairman, I don't have the citation for that, but there was a petition on that exact situation, and as testified, the reason was that the power line had been approved by the council, but none of the infrastructure built, and we actually built the pole before they did the line work.
Thank you.
But if you needed to replace equipment, you'd have the same problem.
We didn't know about it at that time.
If you had to go to a G5,
Oh, yes.
you'd have the same problem.
Yes.
Even though you could get away with the first time, it's the second time.
And that was only because it was a brand new line and it wasn't turned on. As a little bit of history, CLMP had us all over. Tim was there, myself, I think Tony was there. They called in all the carriers to see who wanted to share 345 kV towers. And everybody gave them locations that they were interested in. And they came back, they were going to pre-build them, but then they also came back and said, well, this is going to be a type 4, and you're probably not going to be able to get turn downs. So all of a sudden,
It's like
that's a little history.
you're welcome to drive on a road, we just have no exits or entrances, right? Mr. Golders?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, I know where the 345 kV line is, and I'm on the topographic map after tab 3, and I was wondering if any of the panel knew if the 115 kV line was the, if you want to call it east-west line that goes north of Lake Dawson and south between Lake Watrous and Dawson.
I know, I actually went up there and charted every tower from Calpath Road all the way to Dillon Road, every stanchion number, and I think I got the height of every one. In most places there was 2 stanchions, some places there was 3 stanchions.
Okay.
I don't know which power was on which, to be honest with you.
Okay, so they could parallel also, the 115 and the 345?
There's lines ran right next to each other. If memory serves me, I think the newest poles were on the west side. But I wouldn't swear, I don't know. I just know that there's 2 sets of stanchions and someplace 3 where these large ravines to cross. I don't know one power line from the electricity next.
Chairman, if I could just ask one question. Is there any policy from CLMP you know of how close you could put a tower to the existing right-of-way so that you could sort of, I don't want to say co-locate, but sort of nearby locate?
yeah, I don't know, you mean outside the right of way?
Yeah, I mean, you have the structures and you have your right-of-way and, you know, maybe a private property that abuts CLMP property, or these utility so that they would, you know what I mean, you're sort of sharing the same visual area. Is there a setback to the lines that, you know, to the right-of-way edge?
Well, they don't want us to go underneath the lines, because they're
Okay.
afraid of the line to come down and
Yes.
start putting our equipment.
Yep.
So that, and then sometimes, like, what we're talking about, there can be, they may have plans for another line through there. So obviously they don't want us to be over that, in that particular right of way either. So that's about it.
I'm not aware of a specific policy, but we do have a docket upcoming. It's on Sealand Lane, where we're adjacent to the power line. I have to go back and look, but I'm not aware of a specific policy that has a specific setback which outside the right of way.
Because, you know, I would think they wouldn't want, you know, something that falls off. But you don't know, there's no knowledge of any specific policy or practice?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Estes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you contact CLMP, besides getting all the information you want, tell them that anything you want and they can't give you, they better explain why. And then I am personally interested in why they are not more transparent with this council through you as our agent in these requests. You have to pardon me, Mr. Chairman, it might be your prerogative, but I consider them a public utility and we represent the public.
Yeah, well, they just, again, on this latest, they say that they have there's some regulation, I'm not sure which one it is, regarding homeland security or national security.
I'm familiar with it and I want to spell it out because that doesn't mean it's secret from other government officials.
And so, why don't we then see what kind of response you get, and then we'll let Mr. Estes go and call on thank you, Mr. Estes. We've left Mr. Crone in the dust here. We have all the questions with regard to the power line issue. Great. Mr. Crone, thank you for waiting.
Thank you. Turning back to the first selectman's letter, we covered transmission. The next suggested alternative is the Regional Water Authority property.
Yes, Kevin Day. When I first did the site search on this, I went to the town, talked to the town planner, CEO, the first selectman, told them who I was, what I was attempting to do, got any input they had, and somewhere along the line, they advised me what they were looking for, so on and so forth. I did my normal tax map of the whole area, looked at the largest properties, one of them being the Regional Water Company. I contacted them several times. No one got back to me. I went down to, I think it was New Haven, at 6/13/08, June 13th, and talked to Mr. Chaplik. He was Vice President of Water Quality, and he advised me there's no way they want to have a cell tower on watershed property. And I had asked him if he could put that in writing, and he said he would. It's, I don't know if he said a rule or policy or something, but he would get that to me. He never did. And during the time of submitting the application, we went back and revisited that and asked him again. And I think there's a letter about that. Mr. Lobb, who works for Mr. Fisher, he and I did talk to him, and the answer was still no. The policy is no tower for this watershed property. So they just were not interested in. I even tried going where they had an old building down there, and they said no.
So that's their policy?
I believe we identified on the council that there's a statutory prohibition on class 1, class 2.
What is the classification of this property?
I don't know. I just know I was told no.
Okay, there could be class 3, therefore it could be, so I think we need to put that to bed. Is there a letter?
I don't believe there's a letter. And with respect to these watershed plans, one of the issues that we often face is there's no really available local mapping. So we often have to rely on the Regional Water Authority to give us that information. my, best of my recollection is, well, Mr. Dave does not recall, that he confirmed that it was classified last year, twice years ago. But we'll get a confirmation for the record, this is classified last year.
You walked up there, all the way up. How close is the property line to the water company property?
It's very close.
We went up to where the tower is, and then there's another little incline to another flat area. Is that on the lease property, or is it on the watershed?
As you,
I couldn't see the property line on the map.
as you walked up that incline and made that turn where the truck was, I'm just guessing if you walked 100 feet further, you'd have been on water company property.
Well, I'm saying when we went up to where the tower is,
Yes.
there's a little incline going up there to another flat area. Is that flat area on the Shepherd property? or-
Yes, that area is, that's still on the Shepherd property.
I saw a blue flag, I didn't know what it meant anything.
Well, when they're laying out the compound, they go get different boundaries to work from.
I didn't know whether that was a boundary
No.
there or not. You have a map that has the boundary? You can refer to this?
It's behind that three.
Why protection facility?
Does that have a sight line on it?
Mr. Bassman's going to measure the distance to the property line, approximately from there, from the tower site.
From the proposed tower site, approximately, the estimated distance to the watershed property going due west is about 250 feet from the tower location.
And did you estimate that, have you walked that area at all? Did you estimate whether the flat area is within or without that distance?
I'm not sure which flat area. I have walked the area, but maybe the landlord could.
There's two flat areas. Yeah, there's two flat areas. I think our is here. Oh, okay.
Barbara and Brian, are you describing that area correctly? Is it?
Yes, we were standing where the string was attached. We were standing where the string was attached to the balloon, and then we started walking up a small incline about the distance between these tables, and then we emerged onto a terrace area. On the opposite side of the terrace was a little blue ribbon marking something or other on a bush.
Second terrace is mine. I'm sorry, I know I'm not getting you.
Sure, Mrs. Shepherd, why don't you have a seat for 1 second next to Attorney Fisher? You own the property, right? Is that correct?
You own the property. You own the
Yes, I own the property. I wish I had walked up with you guys, because there's two terraces. I think the south tower is on the first terrace. The second terrace is mine, and then I believe where the blue marker is, might be a water company marker.
That's helpful.
I think.
It sounds like the next terrace is yours.
Yeah,
And the blue line may be the property line of the power company.
right.
Water company.
I thought it was water company.
Thank you.
Would that second terrace be the Bishop West Trail that we saw? Because it looked like it.
You mean part of the blue trail?
Well,
They're calling it Bishop West?
yeah, I have a map. I have a map in front of me that shows a trail that goes through your property.
There is a trail behind my property.
Okay, that might be, I'm thinking that's the trail.
It was part of my property at one time,
Okay,
and yeah, it's the Blue Trail.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor? I don't think it's part of the official Blue Trail of Connecticut. Does it have a name? The Regicides Trail on the rig says it's a Blue Trail. But I don't know.
What's the name of it? Yeah, it is. It is called the Blue Trail.
If it is, then I'd like some more information on it. Seems on the Connecticut Walk map.
That's okay, we have it identified as the Bishop West Trail.
On the Blue Trail, it is a town trail, town recreation department, Connecticut Park and Forest. And is there any sort of brochure or town thing as part of the recreational system?
Well,
Who maintains it?
we will confirm what's known locally apparently as the Blue Trail, and we have as the Bishop and the ownership structure.
Mr. Perot?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other suggested alternative on the letter was existing structures on the Shepherd property, such as silos.
Given the fact that we've applied for a 170-foot tower, 50-foot, not gonna make it.
Has AT&T considered alternative stealth tower designs, such as a tree tower or brown stick?
Before we go there, back in the silo, how tall is the silo?
I believe it's 50 feet.
You believe?
Yeah.
You're under oath, is it, buddy? You swear to it?
Oh.
I don't believe Mrs. Shepherd is under oath, or have it put
There, I don't know how tall my silos are.
Can you find that out?
One collapsed last winter because it was so old, and the other one doesn't even have a cap on it. They're a little rickety.
I just wondering how tall it is.
Yeah.
We can find that out.
I don't know, but there's approximately a 100-foot differential between where that silo is and our current ground elevation, the two ground elevations, but
So it'd be
so,
nice to have the height from the record.
sure, okay.
Mr. Perot?
Yes, regarding alternative tower designs, such as a tree tower or a brown stick, has AT&T considered either?
We'd be open to any suggestion the council made. We've done both. We propose a monopole, gray in color, but as you saw from the balloon flight today, a tree a lot higher than existing trees may not look right. That's been our experience, but brown with flush mounts, we certainly go for that. But the tree tower in that location, my personal opinion, would be pretty ugly.
Do you have a witness for the visual impact of the tower?
Right here.
Thank you.
If there's going to be a tree stealth tower there, would it be above the tree line? When you look at it, would it be skylighted or would it blend into the background?
And the answer to that question is depends on the views, but if you look at, for instance, if you look at views 501 in the visual analysis, it is substantially above the tree line.
Like how much?
Like, if you the 4 antenna sets are 10 foot apart, so that's 40 feet. It appears that it's approximately 60 to 80 feet above the tree line from the turnpike as you look above the turnpike.
Looking at it from your pictures on the Regicides trailer, from my property, it looked like it was hidden by the trees.
In the that's the other side of the coin, if you will, is if you look at views 10 or 11,
You're up high.
when you're up high, the the ridge is a background. So in that case, it would hide the towers.
The worst case is it's 80 feet above the tree line.
The worst case is it's 80 feet above the tree line, exactly.
And would you recommend any stealth applications for that sort of tree?
The stealth applications with those types of views really, they could draw more attention to the tower actually. So we don't typically recommend them when your views are above the existing tree canopy.
We're aware of one in Winchester that does just that.
Thank you. So am I.
What's the height of the trees in that particular area?
Because that's in the field, and I believe I estimated them at 70, 80 feet.
We're talking about 90 feet and higher than the trees, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was just an estimate, Mr. Walensky. They could be higher than that. So.
Okay, thank you.
If I might, regarding the brown stick, there are two other carriers so far that have expressed an interest in this site, both at 140 feet. If we went to a brown stick flush mount type of arrangement, number one, AT&T would need two heights to accommodate their technologies. Verizon has expressed an interest at 140 feet. They would need two heights. Pocket Yoagani Communications has expressed an interest. So between all those, the height of the tower would need to be increased to provide the same coverage if we could go with a flush mount type or enclosed antenna type of array.
What only was
The flush mount, that's correct. We're only addressing the flush mount. T-arms, tree arrangement are independent of that.
Howard? Either Mr. Wells or Mr. Blevin, could you comment on, from your knowledge of the cell towers, on the different colorizations with a low profile antenna, how they would blend in either to the background or the surrounding area? I know in the past that they use different colors. See, at SNAT years ago, used to have the light blue. Could you make it and how they could be more or less adapted to something within this area?
The very first ones were the Valmonts, and they were light blue. That was by a contract with AT&T, Lucent, Western Electric, when they first built cellular. And then later and the theory was that it blended well into the sky as a background. And then later, especially in an area like this where you have clouds about 3/4 at a time, the silver or the gray blended into the background better. But then the brown stick, I'm not sure where that actually came from, but people felt that it blended in better as a tree. So it's a combination of what do you have in the background. Of course, the FAA doesn't like anything blending into the background. So.
I know in the past I've seen some of the lower towers that are where the old SNAT towers. They're actually green too.
Yeah.
You could drive right by without even seeing them. But I just wanted to comment on how it could be adapted rather than having to go to a flesh mount antenna, using low profile and different colorizations or different coloring rather. Thank you.
We can order them.
Mike? What's the next topic we're looking at?
We covered the alternative towers, and now regarding other alternative sites. In the state representative's letter, there was mention of a possible rooftop facility at approximately 1764 to 1768 Litchfield Turnpike. And I was wondering if AT&T considered that.
We looked at it this morning. It's only 0.6 of a mile from an existing cell site, so it really doesn't provide us much incremental additional coverage. And the other additional cell sites around it are higher. So it's way south of where we want to be.
So would you consider it too far from your target area?
Yes.
Could you just identify it on the, in reference to a map for the county's benefit?
How about the new one we have? Where are these new?
It's actually what they're looking at, it's identified in that particular map is actually in the city council database as well, identified as, there's two sites identified, 1764 Litchfield Turnpike and 1768 Litchfield Turnpike in the city council database.
Is it off this map?
It is not.
It's like down here, right? Looks like it's right here at the cross
What you said is the should now.
If you look on that map, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Canolds Pond. If you follow Litchfield Turnpike and just about equal with the 83 below the pond, that's approximately where that site is located.
Thank you.
And I might add, a fairly low height, and as you can see, there's a significant, if you look at that topo, there's a significant amount of terrain between that site and
It's still in your
target
search area?
objective. No, it is not.
That circle is just a mileage, it's not, that's,
That circle, I believe, it was defined by Clough Harbor, and I believe that's related only to visual analysis and not related to RF.
Right, that's a 2-mile radius for visual purposes.
Also on the first selectman's letter was the sewage treatment plant. Oh, that's the same as the Regional Water Authority, as they also run the sewage?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So they don't think that's a good location. And that, I know that's not class 1 or 2 watershed.
Okay.
It better not be. Okay.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Goligoski?
That was going to be one of my questions, is I understand what class 1 and 2 watershed lands are. The actual facility, the sewage treatment tanks at the plant that is, I guess, north of Lake Dawson, did you have specific conversations about that property?
No.
Okay. Do you know what the classification of that specific, it's pretty well shown on one of the aerial photos. I think it's behind tab 3. Third page after tab 3, you can see the 2 water towers, you can see the buildings and such. Could you try to see if you could cajole some type of letter out of them or determination of what, because I can understand the forest lands being protected, but if, it'd be nice to know what that designated area is.
We agree with you. We try to get this correspondence, and when we don't get it, we can only rely on the testimony and the facts that we're going to try again.
Okay.
And just for purposes of the record, the memorandum I provide you to that was really more of a historic issue. The regional water facility you just mentioned, that's actually where the kiln site is. I'm not suggesting that's an issue, I'm just saying that's exactly right.
Okay.
from an RF point of view, is that an acceptable site?
Just to clarify where we're looking at, I believe you said tab 3, and where we have the aerial photograph, and then you see 2.
Looks like 2 aspirins.
Yep, I think that's a better description than I was going with. But if you look at that particular location, the elevation is considerably down from where we are, is one problem. I'm not sure of the height of those structures, but I'm sure they're not 170 feet. And you have, the difference in terrain. And then to further complicate issues, you're back from that ridge that exists. And it's one thing to be up close to a ridge, as you can imagine. As you've heard me say before, this is not exactly line of sight technology, but it's close to it. And if you can imagine sitting close to that ridge and looking out over versus stepping way back and down, I mean, even if that land was available, it's just not going to do us any good to reach over that ridge.
So your testimony that site is unacceptable from an RF point of view?
Correct.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Then, Mr. Goligoski, with that, or maybe it was Professor Tate, do we still need a letter from the company?
Well, Class 3 land, but it's the land behind the tower that we're interested in. And so the answer is yes.
But not as with regard
But
to the
not as-
sewage treatment
not as
plant.
sewage treatment.
I'm gonna try to get it to install.
Great, thank you. Mr. Perron,
Thank you.
you're taking up all our time today.
I'm not sure of your question.
Another alternative site, it was listed on a sheet attached to the first selectman's letter. The Polk property at 1932 Litchfield Turnpike. Is that something AT&T had considered?
That's my neighbor who spoke first.
Yeah, it didn't sound like she was amenable.
I never looked into that property, I didn't think she'd be interested.
I understand Verizon and Pocket Wireless have expressed interest in co-locating at this site. Any other wireless carriers express interest?
They're the only ones we know of at this time.
Has the town expressed an interest in co-locating on the tower?
No.
I don't recall, but we always open up for their use, but I don't recall if they expressed interest. When we first spoke to them in April of 08. I don't.
My understanding, the first selectman saying no, the town is not. But should at any time, regardless of this tower, whatever tower, if they need a spot for the police or fire or EMS, that's always available on any of your towers at any time, whether it's part of this package or later on.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is your minimum antenna height to achieve coverage 167 feet?
Yes, that's true.
What would be the consequences of lowering the antennas by, say, 10 or 20 feet in terms of coverage or handoff?
It would actually open a hole, relatively small, but enough to cause a drop call on Route 63. You take 63 over by Burn Swamp Road in that
Mr.
area.
Glenn, could you just tell us which map you're using so we can follow along, please?
I believe the responses to interrogatories, Chairman, reference the first set. Yeah, it's behind tab D.
Tab D. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you look at the map marked 150 feet, over on the left-hand side, which is the Route 63 side, there's a small encroachment of red there that would, is large enough to cause a drop call and quite a bit of aggravation. That road is very busy. It supports about 12,000 cars a day.
Mr. Blevins, help me out and try and tell me where exactly you are on that chart.
Okay, if you come from,
I've got the current coverage plus proposed site at 170.
170? Okay, well, the area is the same. If you take find the site of S2124.
Right.
And move to the left and down over to the large black road, which is Route 63.
Yep.
There's a small area at one,
If you look at the plot entitled 150.
yes. I'll take the 150, 160, and
Okay.
170.
Give me a second.
Your final page.
I see, I have the plot at 150.
Okay, there's this, over to the left, over to Route 63 and down, there's this blotch of red. that encroaches into Route 63.
Oh, it just brushes about against the side.
Yeah.
I assume that was all yellow when I looked at the plot. Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, Mr. Blevin, as I look at the propagation maps and the new ones and also the ones in the application, it looks like we've gone back to the good old days of yesteryear where we have propagations with no streets and no being designated. I don't want to get new updates, but I just want to, we're used to getting them today with the street markings, and so we know what you're talking about when you say Route 63.
It's a great point, and we hoped, to address it, Mr. Wells provided us with plots that do have maps, and we could use those. We're just discussing for purposes of the heights, but that was one of the things we've been working on to try to get in front of the council and going forward from here on out.
Mr. Wenzel?
Mr. Clemens, at one time or early on in this application, weren't you thinking of a 150-foot tower? I thought I saw in the correspondence someplace that 150 was the initial thought.
Yeah, I think we were.
And why the 170?
Well, we're trying to take the advantage of covering in Route 63, basically using one tower to cover the two roads. And by using the 170, we could eliminate the drop calls in the area that I described. Unfortunately, we don't have any tower prospects over in that area that we can rent. So.
In other words, when you were thinking of 150, you were thinking of that in conjunction, were you thinking of that in conjunction with another tower?
Yes. Yeah, the 224, 21, 24, and 21, 25.
And there was no location for the other tower?
So we got this location and closed down the other one because there was no possibility of getting it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For budgeting purposes, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Walensky. Mr. Estes?
Microphone, please.
Looking at your second set of interrogatories in those propagation maps, can you tell me how big one of those little squares is supposed to represent?
Approximately 90 meters.
90 meters.
270 feet.
270 square feet.
Yeah.
So that's like the 80, that's like 80 yards? It's like
No.
soccer field.
Well, 90 meters, 90 yards, sort of similar. It's 3.28 feet per meter, 3 feet per yard. So it's slightly greater. But
4 times the size of this room?
maybe.
Okay. I'm looking at you.
By the way, that's 90 meters on each side of the thing. The area is much greater.
So I'm looking at your 170-foot proposal and your propagation map and your 150 propagation map, and the area on the left side of the paper, they're both yellow. And the red comes closer to the Route 63 than in the 170 than it does in the 150. And I also see that yellow and red share the common number of -82. So on the edge, I'm going to assume that on the edge of a yellow and red line, it's 82.
On the edge of the yellow and red line, it could be at 82, yes.
So when you talk about the coverage lapse at 150 feet, the road is still in a yellow. There's still yellow on both sides of the road. How is it that you conclude that you have a high probability of dropped calls? I think what you said, when it's still 82 and at worst maybe it goes to 81, if it's or actually 83 when it moves into the red and it's not even in the red.
Yeah, some of that's a hedging a bet here because we're taking such a low sample rate, if you will. In other words, the amount of distance covered by the bins, by using a higher, or trying to get a higher value there, we're trying to take out any inaccuracies of the plotting program itself. I mean, these are programs; they're not.
So let me figure this out. The witness the other day talked about, I'm guessing the speed limit on that road is 40, 50 miles an hour. You're talking maybe 2 or 3 squares. Driving at 50 miles an hour, you're talking about 1-2 seconds in that that area that may be potentially red.
One moment, please. Okay, thank you.
This is 170. So is my
It would actually be a
base
little greater distance, it'd be about 500 feet.
So 500 feet at 50 miles an hour, someone might lose a signal in that 1 or 2 seconds that they're in that area that's close to a red. And red doesn't mean they lose a signal, it just means they are in danger of losing a signal.
Potentially.
I mean, there's a couple of things I might add. It's hard to represent everything that goes on in a complicated network on a set of plots. Not everything just comes down to there's no strength. This is a good indication of what happens. Clearly, this is somewhat of a problem area for AT&T in this particular area. You know, and it's somewhat easy to focus in on this area with the plots because this is what we can show easily. What happens is when you have an area that's under, for lack of a better term, stress, it does affect the rest of the network. If you look at all the red on the other side of this that we've been struggling to fulfill, that's not being fulfilled. So this site also has to cover into those red areas as well. And so every incremental that we go down, it's also stressing that area that this site has to cover within there. The other thing that I would add is that both Pocket Communications and Verizon have expressed a need for 140 feet. I'm a little more familiar with Pocket's particular needs in this area. And with Pocket, they operate at the AWS frequencies, which is up there beyond PCS. They have a particular challenge in this area, especially along Route 63. And that particular hole, as well as in the south a little more, are even more aggravated because of the higher frequencies that they're licensed to operate in. And as I said, they need a minimum of 140 feet. And then Verizon has also expressed a need for 140 feet. And obviously, they can't both occupy that same height. So that, I understand Mr. Estes' concern regarding kind of the bin size and, again, do the best we can to represent the complications of the network on this simple thing, on this simple plot. But the bottom line here is in this particular area and to the west of that, you can certainly see that this is a trouble area. And you can kind of play the incrementalism game. Hey, why don't you go down 10 feet? There's not that much difference. Well, okay, that's our new baseline. Why don't you go down another 10 feet? Well, not much difference there. Every time you're putting more stress on this site and not offloading the problems that are going on because all these other sites are trying to reach into this area.
You made a lot of points. Let me ask you about it.
Your microphone?
You made a lot of points. Let me ask you about it. These propagation maps that you submitted to us are your best guess. They're not, and what you related to me was, they're kind of this, that, but, it could be variation one side or the other. But you're not testifying this is one side or the other. You're saying this is your midpoint estimate of what the coverage is, not conservative or negative. Is that true?
For this particular application, I'll let Mr. Blevins respond to that. What we did for what C-squared or I did for this particular application, we took Mr. Levin's output from his program, just putting our version, which you're not looking at here. We just put it on our map so that you can see road labels and such. But one thing I could add in regard to that question is what we did when AT&T asked us to get involved in this application is we sent a drive team out to that particular area with an AT&T phone, and not just looking at the phone, we have some sophisticated, relatively sophisticated test equipment that takes in all the inputs on that phone, so you're not just looking at, you're not counting the number of bars, we're actually getting down to some scientific data. When we drove that area, we confirmed that these plots are accurate and that there are a number of significant problems in this area, and particularly in this area with our test equipment. We showed several dropped calls in the area for the duration that we were out there. It wasn't like we were just driving up and down the road over and over again because we just wanted to get a sample. But even that sample, just driving the road once, trying to drive each road once, we had a number of dropped calls in the area.
That was a very simple question. You were either undercutting this presentation saying it's not particularly accurate, or are you saying this is the best accuracy I have?
This is the best accuracy we have.
Thank
and
you.
It's not a guess.
Thank you. You can make this, even at the proposed 170 feet, there is still a substantial amount of red area to, whether it's left or right, north, to the left on this picture, that this tower is just not going to reach. And between 150 and 170, it's give or take 100 yards. Am I understanding your little square measurements right?
Essentially, yes.
You said pocket it needs to be at a certain height because of its technology. Do you ever propose a tower and say we'll give the top spot to a proposed co-locator because their technology isn't as amenable to us, and you take the lower spot because your technology is better?
I've done that before.
And is that a possibility here?
To an extent, yes.
You also said that there's 3 possible cell companies that are looking to locate on this house. How common is that? When you make an application, you have more than, that you have 3 or more people that are supporting your application.
It's quite common once it becomes filed with the council. Carries notified, becomes knowledgeable, and then their RF engineers see if it has a need, and then it gets into the budgeting process. Most all the towers have worked on the past 2 years have co-locators on them.
I probably should know this, but my council members probably do. How many potential co-locators are there? 7, 8? 5?
Not specific, but in the industry.
I have to actually count them up, but I think your estimate is approximately correct. Looking at 7 or 8 carriers. If I could just, one more thing on the height that you mentioned, if we did put AT&T at the bottom spot, we currently do have, again, two co-locators that are interested at 140 feet. Obviously, one of those would have to bump up to 150 feet. We are talking center line, so the top of the antenna would be approximately 153, 154. So we're talking, if we did put AT&T at the bottom, a 10-foot reduction in height. I don't know what that does for visibility. And then, as you mentioned, Mr. Esty, there are a number of other carriers. And I mentioned Pocket and their AWS frequency being up fairly, limiting their ability to cover as much. And then you have the WiMAX installation for Clearwire. They're operating at even higher frequencies, so they have some issues as well.
So yeah, but my point is there are potentially, let's say 8 carriers that would want to be on a tower and be in this area on a tower, and if the council were looking at this as a group, got this tower for 3 or 4 of them, or 3 of them at acceptable heights, and you have another tower for another 3 of them, and a 3rd tower for the last 2. And they all, hypothetically, they all could come in here and want to be located in Woodbury. Have you talked to the town or any of its commissions about their preference for multiple lower towers, or as opposed to fewer or a single but taller tower?
I don't believe as part of the technical consultation, we got a preference for multiple lower towers.
And if any of the town commissions or you were able to address that point later in this hearing, I'd be interested in hearing the trade-offs, the hard trade-offs.
We could certainly address it through the testimony of Mr. Blevins on the, because there were 2 search rings that went to 1, and you could address it from that perspective, I think. And you could address the search ring to the north of the evangelistic sites.
Yeah, one time we did have 2 search rings along Route 69, one more north and one more south than this ring, so it was like a combination of 2, but we couldn't get one for 2125, which was our other cell number. Also, we've been working, I think we've been working on this thing, in this area since 1988, trying to get cells in here. And the only ones we've been able to get are along the Amity area of Route 15. And we've applied, Verizon's applied, T-Mobile's applied, everybody's applied for sites in this area. And nobody's been successful. We've gone to meetings with the town, we've gone to group meetings with them. Every area that's been proposed has been rejected. So, for all intents and purposes, I'd have to say I don't see a lot of interest in multiple locations or otherwise.
Just for purposes of the record, the mapping is behind tab 2 of the application and shows those 2 search rings that Mr. Blevins was referencing. And Mr. Dane, you can address the site searches that were done in the area.
Basically, the search ring to the north, I checked the entire area as indicated on that map, and I found no property that was acceptable for RF or an interested owner. It just was nothing. And that being a problem, it was a discussion with RF, realizing if we raised the height of the lower tower some, we were able to accommodate the area up into Bethany Downs Road. It would peak over the bridge, cover Amity Road, and connect to the site to the south. So, but I couldn't find anything up in that north area at all.
Mr. Gallagher.
So the conclusion of that story is you are proposing